I'm Jonathan, 31 years old. I work as a long-haul bus driver. Currently, I live with my wife in the town of Galena. That evening, I received a late-night passenger ride to the town, about a 3-hour drive from my home. After safely dropping off the passengers at 11 p.m., I immediately headed back home. As usual, I would find the nearest motel to spend the night before returning home in the morning. But that day was very important because my wife was about to give birth and was waiting for me in the hospital. We were expecting our first child, a cute little boy, and just the thought of it made me very excited. I searched on Google Maps for the shortest route home. Following Google Maps directions for about an hour, I turned right off the highway onto a narrow dirt road. At that moment, I was only thinking about my wife and child, not noticing the ominous darkness enveloping the road in my car. After driving a bit further, suddenly the radio in my car started making static noises. I tried to turn off the knob but couldn't, and adjusting the radio frequency didn't stop the annoying static noise. Feeling helpless, I lightly tapped the radio and thought there might be a problem with it. Suddenly, a woman's voice came from the radio. "Please be advised, ahead you will encounter a landslide on the road. Absolutely do not talk or make eye contact with the people there unless you want to endanger your life." I was extremely surprised, but then thought it might be some program airing on the radio. After driving a bit more, the road ahead indeed had a landslide and there was a warning sign. I looked around in astonishment, and 2 rescue workers emerged from the darkness. I couldn't see their faces clearly, only their silhouettes. One was very overweight and the other was thin. They slowly approached the BMW parked in front of my car. The owner of the BMW stepped out and politely greeted them. Suddenly, the thin rescue worker rushed forward and grabbed the BMW owner. They both fell in front of the BMW, so I couldn't see what was happening. I was quite panicked at that moment, wondering if I should run over to assess the situation or not. The horrifying began to unfold. The overweight rescue worker was staring directly at my car, but it wasn't a normal look. He turned his head 180 degrees, his face and back facing towards me. He was smiling, a wide, ear-to-ear grin. He maintained that posture and walked towards my car. I was extremely frightened, quickly shifted into reverse and pressed on the gas to back up, but my car didn't budge. I became even more frantic. That rescue worker had now walked right next to the driver's side window of my car. I remembered the instructions from the woman on the radio, not to talk or make eye contact with the people there. I trembled, trying to keep my gaze straight ahead. The rescue worker leaned down to look into my car, still wearing that eerie smile. He repeatedly pounded on my car window, not with his hands but with his head. My heart was pounding at full force, and I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel tightly. The pounding grew louder and more intense. The only thing in my head at that moment was my wife and the soon-to-be-born child. I don't know how long after the pounding stopped. I took a deep breath and slowly opened my eyes. The overweight rescue worker was still staring into my car and smiling. In front of me was the thin rescue worker, his body covered in blood. I didn't know what he had done to the BMW owner. My car was now started. I immediately reversed and sped away at 62 miles per hour. After driving a fair distance, I calmed down. I suddenly remembered I had to call the police. I tried to describe in detail everything I had just experienced. The police told me to stay calm and send them my location. After identifying my location, the police asked me to stay put so they could find me as quickly as possible. I agreed, but as soon as I hung up the phone, I remembered my wife in the hospital. Without much thought, I immediately pressed on the gas and sped away. When I saw the turnoff leading to the highway, I was relieved. But as soon as I turned the steering wheel to enter, in front of me was the dirt road with the landslide and those 2 rescue workers. What on earth is happening? I immediately turned the car around and sped off, not wanting to encounter those 2 terrifying figures again. But everything seemed to be mocking me. Once again, I returned to that road. The 2 rescue workers looked at me, still with that wide grin, but this time the laughter was very loud and echoed in the dark. It was as if those 2 lunatics were mocking me. At that moment, I didn't slow down but pressed the gas pedal even harder. I didn't know why I acted like that. The car sped up, aiming straight at those two rescue workers. In front of me, everything was pitch black. I couldn't comprehend what had happened next. Suddenly, the eerie faces of the two rescue workers appeared. Their large, wild eyes, wide grinning mouths with sharp, jagged teeth dripping with blood. They were getting closer and closer to me, the mouth gaping wide as if to swallow everything. They emitted the cry of a newborn baby. It pierced my ears painfully. I woke up. In front of me was the hospital scene. My wife holding our son sitting on a wheelchair next to my bed. I woke up completely sober when I realized the crying of my son. My wife burst into tears when she saw me awake. She said the police found me sitting in the car in an unconscious state. I asked my wife where I was found. She said it was on the dirt road with the landslide, but there was no BMW or rescue workers there. The police concluded that my accident was due to night driving leading to stress and drowsiness. I recounted to the police and my wife what I had experienced, but they all thought it was just a nightmare. After, the accident left me with repercussions. I often suffered from headaches, so I couldn't drive anymore. My car, after being repaired for a week at the garage, was brought back home. Strangely, the dirt on the driver's side window couldn't be cleaned. I realized with a start that it was the mark when the overweight rescue worker used his head to pound on it. Until now, I still couldn't explain everything that happened that night. I'm Richard, 29 years old. I work as a driver for the ride-sharing company Uber. Currently, I live with my grandmother in a small house in San Francisco. Here, the demand for ride-sharing services from people is very high. I might be able to scrape out a living for me and my grandmother. If there's no important matter, I'll work every day from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. One weekend evening, I had almost no passengers for the whole day. At 10 p.m. when I was about to end my workday, suddenly the app showed a ride request. Looking at the distance, it was quite far, in the suburban area. But since I didn't have many passengers all day, I gladly decided to accept the ride. The passenger's location was about a mile from where I was standing. I started moving to pick up the passenger. When I arrived at the exact location, there was no one around. I felt quite anxious, thinking of calling the customer. Suddenly, a girl appeared out of nowhere, bending down to look through the car window and smiling at me. I startled. I dropped my phone, taking a few seconds to process everything. I quickly got out of the car to greet the girl, but I began to feel uneasy. She, with long tousled hair, wearing a long white dress, holding a doll. It wasn't an ordinary doll. Its face was haunting with large black eyes covering half of its face. It was more terrifying than the Annabelle doll in the horror movie I watched. As I was lost in my thoughts about the doll, suddenly the girl spoke. "Take me home, please." Her voice was very soft, giving a gloomy feeling as if echoing from the depths of hell. I felt a surge of cold air running down my spine. I nervously chuckled and opened the car door for her. But she looked at me with amusement and then proceeded to open the door and sit in the back seat. I quickly sat in the driver's seat and started the car. Even though I'm a 29-year-old guy with a fairly tall stature, in that situation, I'm sure anyone would be as shaken as I was. I drove, my body drenched in sweat even though the air conditioning in the car was on. As I was about to stop at a red light, that girl uttered that scary voice again. "What if we run the red light? If you get fined, I'll pay, don't worry." After saying that, she chuckled, and I also laughed out loud to dispel that ominous atmosphere. But my laughter stuck on my throat. I said I'm a law-abiding person, so I wouldn't do that. "You're such a coward, but living people are usually like that, unlike me." Again, that teasing laughter, but it was really not amusing at all. My body was cold, but I kept sweating. All I could do was to gulp and stay as calm as possible. I remained silent, trying to drive a bit faster to end this ride. Occasionally, I glanced at the rearview mirror to check on the back seat. "Focus on driving, please," that gentle voice echoed, making me startle. instantly stiffening my body. Suddenly, there was a desperate scream, and reflexively I turned back to look. A grotesque face with bulging white eyes full of red veins, the mouth screaming loudly, was inches from my face. The horror I felt at that moment cannot be described. I panicked and screamed loudly. Fortunately, the sharp reflexes of a driver helped me step on the brake correctly instead of the gas pedal. The girl, holding the doll with the grotesque face, fell back into the back seat, laughing hysterically. I still hadn't recovered. My heavy breathing only seemed to excite her even more.
Do living people get startled like that?
What on earth was happening to me? I didn't know if I was carrying a person, a ghost, or mentally unstable. Seeing that I didn't say anything, discomfort was evident on her face. She twisted the doll's head back to its original position, with the black eyes as before, then dirtied it. She said she just wanted to play a little. I had thought of ending this ride here. The girl pointed forward, saying we were almost home, and I just needed to drive a little further. Having come this far, I reconsidered and continued driving. Now, whether it was a person or a ghost or anything else, I didn't care anymore. When we reached where she called home, I stopped, got out of the car politely, and opened the door. She stepped out, smiling at me. Now I looked closely. She was extremely beautiful, with a bright, innocent, and very attractive smile. The ride cost $40, and she handed me a $100 bill, saying there was no need to return the change. I thanked her and was about to turn and leave, but looking around, it was a dark dirt road with no houses around. I asked her if she was sure this was home. She laughed and said someone from her family would come to pick her up right now. I looked down and saw her standing on the ground with both feet and casting a shadow on the road under the car's headlights. I breathed a sigh of relief, reassuring myself that this wasn't a ghost. But I couldn't leave her alone like that, so I decided to stay with her until her family came to pick her up. A moment later, a luxurious Rolls-Royce arrived. The girl waved to me and got into the car. Only now did I understand what had happened. I also got in the car and drove in the opposite direction. Looking in the rearview mirror, my mind kept thinking about that girl. Now I remembered I hadn't asked her name. But just a few seconds later, when I looked back, the Rolls-Royce had disappeared into the night. I didn't know when. I couldn't be sure if everything was a dream or real, nor could I tell if that girl was a human or a ghost. I've heard and watched many stories and movies about supernatural phenomena, but I never thought I would encounter such an inexplicable phenomena in real life.
I'm Martin, 33 years old, living in Houston, USA. I have a job with a high income in exchange for a busy work schedule. I've experienced many hotels from budget to luxury, but my hotel experience during a business trip to New York 3 years ago still haunts me. I arrived at the budget hotel at 11 p.m. I didn't have much time to choose a place to stay. The receptionist told me there was only one room left in Area B. There were 2 rooms on that floor. She told me to avoid disturbing the room with the red sign S1302 next to it, because that was the place the young couple rented for a fixed period of 1 month. I was very tired after a long flight, so I didn't pay attention to that room. I had a 4-day business trip here. The first night went smoothly. I slept very well. The next day, I finished work and returned to the hotel at 8 p.m. After showering and changing into comfortable pajamas, I lay on the bed to relax. Suddenly, giggles rang out in the next room, which was the young couple's room. Then there were moans. They were probably having fun. I put on headphones, turned on the music quite loudly, and fell asleep after that. On the 3rd night, screams and slightly crazy laughter rang out, startling me awake. Looking at the phone clock, it was 12 o'clock. I'm quite uncomfortable because work is stressful all day long, so I really need to get enough sleep. I called the front desk to complain and wanted them to remind the couple to limit such noises. I regret renting a hotel with such poor soundproofing quality. It took 10 minutes for the laughter to stop, and it took me a long time to fall asleep again. The next day I felt tired and went to meet my business partner. The last night I returned to the hotel at 10 p.m. Tomorrow morning I will go home to rest. But this last night was truly more terrible than the previous nights. Because I had drunken a lot of coffee during the day, I have difficulty sleeping. It was nearly 11 o'clock when I heard footsteps running in the hallway. Why are they still making noise when I already responded to the receptionist? I approached the door, intending to directly remind the couple because they were outside anyway. But as soon as I opened the door and walked out, a woman wearing a thin nightgown covering her feet, long black hair hanging down, eyes staring lifelessly. In her hand, she held a sharp, dirty knife straight towards me. I immediately retreated into my room and avoided it. She still maintained that position and ran past. I followed her with my eyes, even though I was very scared. She suddenly stopped, twisted her neck, and made a cracking sound and looked straight back at me. I panicked and quickly locked the door. My whole body trembled. My mind was dizzy and panicked. I was about to call the receptionist when there was a knock on my door. I felt like my heart lost a beat. It took me a few seconds to calm down, but that knocking sound continued. I held my breath, slowly turned around and looked through the peephole. What caught my eye was the image of the woman just standing and staring at the door. The creepy smile on her thin face sent chills down my spine. I didn't know what to do next. Suddenly, a man's loud, angry scream rang out. Then his arm held something and swung it strongly towards the woman. Blood caught on my door, covering the peephole, a dark red color and a fishy smell. I covered my mouth tightly, not daring to scream. I don't remember whether I walked or crawled to the hotel desk phone. I tried my best to put it into words. I asked the receptionist, the security guard, the manager, anyone to come to my room immediately. The hotel manager and staff were present, and nearby tenants ran in panic and gossiped. On the floor right in front of my room, a woman lay in a pool of blood. The receptionist confirmed that this is the wife who rented 1302. About 10 minutes later, the police arrived and sealed off the scene. The police asked the receptionist to use the spare key to open the door to room 1302. In the room, there was a horrifying scene with blood, syringes, ropes, sharp knives, and a very strong smell. Lying on the sofa was the body of a man with a long cut on his neck, still bleeding, and a knife clutched tightly in his hand. According to police investigation, the man and woman were Jax and Jesse, their husband and wife. The hotel room is a place they rented to satisfy their drug addiction. The hotel receptionist was also bribed by the couple. Days of constant drug use make them mad and lose all self-control. Jax murdered his wife, and then he went back to his room and committed suicide. I asked the hotel to move me to another room and booked my plane ticket for the earliest flight home.
The story I will tell is about the life of a mentally ill woman named Mia, 62 years old. She has a scary appearance with long scars on both sides of her mouth, all the way to her ears. She has no teeth, nail-less fingers, and jagged hair and eyelashes. She didn't speak, didn't express anything, just sat alone all day and looked out the window with dull eyes. Back in time 30 years ago, Mia had a wealthy life with her husband, Lucas, in a large mansion located in the wealthiest area of New York. They didn't have any children, which is also what worries Mia the most. To reduce the emptiness of the villa, the couple hired many people to work for them. One of them is a beautiful girl named Emma. Lucas was attracted to Emma's beauty. Out of jealousy, Mia begins to notice and get annoyed with Emma. Suddenly, one day Emma disappeared without any trace. All the people working in the villa do not care about that disappearance. They knew the landlady didn't like Emma and they didn't want to get involved.
and Mia told her husband that he had fired Emma from her job because she was too clumsy. Everything returns to normal until Mia begins to act strangely every night. One evening around 12 o'clock while the couple was sleeping, Mia suddenly screamed in pain. Lucas woke up startled and saw his wife tugging at her hair. There was a lot of hair on the blanket. Mia's scalp was pulled until it was red. Lucas quickly stopped his wife. The next morning, Mia said that a long, cold hand reached out and grabbed her hair and pulled hard. Lucas and the servants think Mia is sleepwalking in her sleep. Things continued in an increasingly terrifying direction. Another day, Lucas came home very late, walked into the bedroom. The scene shocked Lucas. On the floor, on the bed, and in the wardrobe were long blood stains. Even more horrifying were the bloody fingernails scattered everywhere. Lucas quickly called out his wife's name. When he ran to the bathroom, Lucas saw Mia sitting in the bathtub with her head down, her fingertips crimson red. On the floor is a pair of bloody pliers. Lucas immediately called an ambulance to take Mia to the hospital. After regaining consciousness, Mia cried and told her husband that a hand used pliers to pull out all her nails. Lucas took Mia to see a psychiatrist and she was diagnosed with a mental disorder. Lucas told the staff to be careful and give Mia her medicine on time. A week later, Mia returned to normal, but her nails could no longer grow back. The most terrifying thing happened on Mia's 32nd birthday. Mia and her husband held a grand party inviting all relatives, friends, and important partners. Everything went perfectly. They ate together, talked, and waited until 12 o'clock to blow out the candles to celebrate Mia's new age. When it was 12 o'clock, Mia told her husband that she wanted to go to her room to change into a gorgeous dress. The giant cake was prepared. Lucas held a large bouquet of flowers in his hand with a happy expression waiting for his wife to come down. The clock struck exactly 12 o'clock. A crazy and distorted laugh rang out, making everyone bewildered. Mia approached with a terrifying and haunting appearance. Mia smiled widely, a smile without teeth, and from ear to ear, clutching a bloody knife in her hand. Blood continuously flowed from her mouth and face, staining her white dress and expensive crystals. Everyone present at the ceremony was stunned. Mia's mother fainted. No one dared come close to Mia, not even Lucas. He stood looking at his wife with fearful eyes. Mia turned 32 years old, which was also the time she was taken to the emergency room and transferred to a mental hospital. The villa is surrounded by a gloomy and cold atmosphere, until one day, the gardener discovered a 60% decomposed body in the corner of the garden. Lucas immediately reported to the police, and both he and the people working in the house were put under investigation. A week later, the whole incident came to light. The decomposed body was Emma's. Because she encountered Emma's many attempts to seduce Lucas, blind jealousy took over Mia. She ordered the housekeeper and 2 servants to drag Emma to the back garden. The housekeeper was ordered to cut off all of Emma's hair and eyelashes, and the servants pulled out all of Emma's fingernails and teeth. After that, Mia herself used scissors to cut Emma's mouth, so that the lovely mouth that usually smiled gracefully every time she met Lucas extended all the way to her ears. Mia asked the housekeeper and 2 servants to keep it absolutely secret and paid them a large amount of money. Lucas falls into a serious psychological trauma, haunted by his wife's horrifying face and brutality. This is the terrible story I will tell on Halloween. I'm Jane, 21 years old, working for an auto garage in town. Just like every year, the streets, shops, and homes are filled with Halloween decorations. One morning while walking, I was attracted to a group of people gathering on the sidewalk. When we got closer to see, people were enjoying themselves, taking pictures with a mannequin hanging from a tree. The mannequin was female, wearing a white dress with lots of stains and long, scraggly brown hair, body covered in bruises. The face was pale with a haunting expression, her saucer eyes wide open, mouth wide open with bleeding stains. I and everyone there were amazed at such an uncanny and realistic mannequin. I also enjoy taking photos with the mannequin, then sharing it on social networks to immerse in the Halloween atmosphere. My photo quickly had a large amount of interactions. "Yo, it's really like that girl's hanging right behind you." Reading that comment from a friend, I laughed out loud. One evening, about 3 days later, I was on my way home from work, quite late because the shop was very busy that day. There was a group of people gathering on the street. I slowed down and realized that was the place where the famous mannequin was decorated. It was well known for its realistic details, I thought, until I saw a cop car parked nearby. Out of curiosity, I got out of the car to find out what's going on. Trying to squeeze through the scene before my eyes was so terrifying that I immediately felt nauseous. The mannequin had her flesh torn and skin dangling and was now crawling with maggots, and a terrible stench arose. Its face was also much paler and seemed to be puffing out. "Oh my God, that's a real person, not a Halloween decoration!" The people standing around started talking to each other. Immediately I shivered, a cold running down my spine. The police are blocking the scene and asking everyone to disperse to make it easier for the coroners to investigate. I returned home haunted by that woman's appearance. Looking back at the photo, I realized I was taking a photo with a hanging corpse. She was looking at me as if she knew I was looking at her through the phone. The creepy smile was full of blood. The eyes were full of pain and hatred. I was startled and zoomed in on the photo to look closely. That creepy smile has since disappeared. I hastily deleted the photo and tried to do chores around the house to not think about it anymore. But that whole evening, I was constantly haunted by a feeling of uneasiness that I don't know why is there. I went to my room early, trying to relieve my anxiety by playing games. After a while, I decided to go downstairs to get some snacks. As soon as I looked towards the door, I was startled and screamed loudly when I saw the silhouette of a woman wearing a white dress with long flowing hair at the door.
"Are you alright?"
It turned out to be my mother. My heart skipped a beat. I acted as if nothing happened. I told my mother it was okay, and I went to bed and covered myself with the blanket. I don't remember what time it was when I woke up. The feeling of something touching my hair and nose makes me uncomfortable. As I slowly opened my eyes, I saw a foot hovering right in front of me. I looked up. The hanging woman's body was looking at me with a rotten face and a bloody smile. I was so scared that I couldn't open my mouth or move. Suddenly, the body's head fell right in front of me. That smile and eyes right before my eyes. I jolted from my bed with all my strength, eyes still closed shut, screamed my lungs out. I ran down to the living room. The loud scream woke everyone in my home up. The whole night my parents were with me because I was so panicked. 2 days later, the town news reported on the incident that the decorative mannequin on the street was actually the corpse of a hanged woman. The girl's identity was discovered. Her name was Hannah, 20 years old. She was murdered by her vile, cruel, junkie boyfriend. After that, I was traumatized by girls with long hair wearing white clothes, especially white dresses. One evening, I worked overtime at the garage. At that time, around 11 a.m., a Toyota Camry entered the garage with its warning lights flashing continuously. I ran out to find the situation. Stepping out of the car was a girl with long hair, wearing a white dress that covered most of her legs. She didn't look at me but was still bending down to get something from the car. I started to feel nervous. I asked her what help she needed. She said there was a problem with her car's brakes, causing her to almost have an accident, and she wanted me to check it for her. She stood up straight and looked at me, the face that I knew too well. She smiled and introduced herself as Hannah.